What if the story of human exploration is far older, far more connected, and far more global than anything we were ever taught in school? What if the Pacific Ocean was not a barrier that separated civilizations, but a living highway that connected them thousands of years before Europe ever entered the picture? And what if the Philippines, long before Spain, long before the United States, long before modern nations existed, played a central role in that forgotten global story? For centuries, history books told us that contact between Asia and the Americas began only after European arrival. According to that version of history, the Pacific was too vast, too dangerous, too unpredictable for ancient people to cross. But in recent decades, that idea has quietly begun to collapse, because archaeology, DNA science, oceanography, linguistics, and ancient navigation research are now revealing a very different picture of the ancient world, a picture where the ancestors of Filipinos, among the greatest sailors humanity has ever produced, were already mastering the Pacific long before Columbus ever sailed the Atlantic. To understand this possibility, we must first understand who the ancient Filipinos really were. Long before colonization, the Philippine archipelago was home to Austronesian peoples whose entire civilization was built around the sea. These were not landlocked societies that occasionally ventured onto water. These were ocean people. Their villages faced the coast. Their food came from the sea. Their myths, songs, and rituals revolved around waves, winds, stars, and voyages. Their technology evolved not for walls or castles, but for boats. Boats designed to survive open ocean conditions. Our goal on this video is get 500 likes, and share your reaction on comments, subscribe to channel, turn on notification. The most famous of these vessels was the balangay. When archaeologists uncovered ancient balangay boats in Butuan, they were stunned. These ships were not primitive. They used advanced sewn plank construction, flexible hulls that absorbed wave energy, and outriggers that provided extraordinary stability. There were no nails, no metal fasteners, only precision engineering so accurate that modern shipbuilders still study it today. These boats were not designed for short coastal trips. They were designed for long-distance ocean travel. Equally astonishing was the navigation knowledge behind them. Ancient Filipino navigators memorized star paths that shifted with the seasons. They read wave patterns reflected off islands hundreds of kilometers away. They used cloud formations, bird behavior, ocean color, and wind smell to locate land beyond the horizon. This was not guesswork. It was a sophisticated science developed over thousands of years and passed down through oral tradition. With this technology and knowledge, the ancestors of Filipinos launched the largest maritime expansion in human history, the Austronesian migration. From the Philippines, these people spread outward across the Pacific, into Micronesia, Melanesia, and Polynesia. They reached Samoa, Tonga, Tahiti, Hawaii, Aotearoa, and Easter Island. They also traveled westward across the Indian Ocean, eventually reaching Madagascar, where the language and DNA still trace directly back to the Philippines today. This fact alone should change how we view ancient navigation. If Filipino-descended sailors could cross 7,000 kilometers of open ocean to Africa, then crossing the Pacific to the Americas was not beyond their capabilities. The idea that ancient people could not cross vast oceans collapses completely when confronted with Austronesian reality. But for a long time, historians still insisted that while Polynesians reached nearly every island in the Pacific, the Americas remained untouched until Europeans arrived. That claim held until archaeology began uncovering evidence that simply should not exist. In South America, archaeologists discovered ancient chicken bones dating to before European contact. Chickens are not native to the Americas. Genetic testing revealed that these chickens matched Polynesian, not European, lineages. This meant that Pacific sailors reached the Americas long before Columbus. And because Polynesians descend from Austronesians, whose roots trace back to the Philippines, the chain of connection became impossible to ignore. Then there was the sweet potato. Native to South America, yet found across Polynesia centuries before European arrival. Its Polynesian name, kumara, closely resembles words used by indigenous peoples in the Andes. Plants do not cross oceans on their own. Humans carried them. That means contact happened, and contact across the Pacific could only occur through the same seafaring network that began in the Philippines. DNA research added another layer. Genetic studies have identified Native American DNA markers in certain Polynesian populations that predate European contact. This does not prove that ancient Filipinos directly settled the Americas, but it does prove that the Pacific world and the Americas were connected before Europeans arrived. And once again, every Pacific genetic trail leads back to a single origin point: the ancient Philippines. But evidence does not stop at genetics and botany. Boat-building techniques among some indigenous coastal groups in the Americas show similarities to Austronesian sewn plank methods. Artistic motifs, spirals, bird-human figures, sun symbols appear across the Pacific and the Americas in ways that raise serious questions for anthropologists. Oral traditions from Polynesia speak of voyages far to the east, to distant lands beyond the rising sun. Meanwhile, Native American legends describe people arriving from the west, across the ocean, in long wooden boats. Each of these clues alone might be dismissed. Together they form a pattern. Modern oceanographers have now modeled ancient wind and current systems. Their findings are remarkable. During certain climatic periods, skilled navigators using ancient technology could intentionally sail from Polynesia to South America using prevailing winds and currents. These were not random drifts. These were navigable routes. At this point, the question shifts. It is no longer, was it possible? It becomes, why wouldn't it have happened? The Philippines sits at the very heart of this story, because without the original Austronesian expansion from the Philippine archipelago, none of this would be possible. The navigation systems, ship designs, and ocean knowledge that carried Polynesians across the Pacific all originated thousands of years earlier among Filipino ancestors. This brings us to a powerful realization. Even if the final contact with the Americas was made by Polynesians, Filipino ancestry, technology, and knowledge were already embedded in that journey. In that sense, the Philippines was already part of the story, whether directly or indirectly. Then history offers a strange confirmation. When Spain finally crossed the Pacific in the 16th century and established the Manila-Acapulco galleon trade, they relied heavily on Filipino sailors. Filipinos became navigators, shipbuilders, carpenters, and crew across the Pacific route. Spanish records describe Filipinos as exceptionally skilled at reading the ocean, surviving storms, and navigating vast distances. What shocked Europeans most was how naturally Filipinos adapted to the Pacific crossing, as if this knowledge was already deeply embedded in their culture. And perhaps it was, because cultural memory lasts longer than empires. Knowledge passed orally can survive long after written records disappear. The ancient seafaring knowledge of the Philippines may have echoed across generations, preserved in traditions, instincts, and skills long after earlier voyages faded into legend. What we are seeing now is not a sudden rewriting of history, but a slow correction. History was written for centuries through a Eurocentric lens that underestimated non-Western civilizations. It assumed exploration belonged to Europeans, and that everyone else was isolated until discovered. But science is dismantling that narrative piece by piece. The ancient world was not isolated. The Pacific was not empty. The Philippines was not peripheral. It was central. The ancestors of Filipinos helped shape one of the greatest human movements ever undertaken. They launched a maritime tradition that spanned half the planet. They passed down knowledge that allowed humans to conquer the largest ocean on Earth. And through that legacy, they may have played a role, directly or indirectly, in connecting Asia and the Americas long before Columbus. This does not diminish Native American civilizations. It does not erase Polynesian achievement. It does not replace one myth with another. Instead, it reveals something far more profound. Ancient humanity was interconnected, curious, brave, and far more capable than we ever imagined. The story of the Philippines and the Americas is not about who arrived first. It is about recognizing that the ocean did not divide us. It connected us. And that connection was forged by sailors who trusted the stars, respected the sea, and believed the horizon was not the end, but the beginning. As more discoveries emerge, this story will continue to evolve. New DNA studies, new underwater archaeology, new ocean simulations, new interpretations of old myths. And with each discovery, one truth becomes clearer. The ancient Pacific world was alive with movement, exploration, and exchange. And at the heart of that world stood the Philippines. The ocean remembers. The DNA remembers. And now, humanity is finally beginning to remember too. They continue in the next video.